This is Audible.
Penguin Random House Audio presents 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History and How It Shattered a Nation. This is the author, Andrew Ross Sorkin. For my children, Henry, Max, and Sydney, love you always. The ordinary human being does not live long enough to draw any substantial benefit from his own experience. And no one, it seems, can benefit by the experiences of others. Being both a father and teacher, I know we can teach our children nothing. Each must learn its lesson anew. Albert Einstein, October 26, 1929. Author's Note. Many people know 1929 as the year of the stock market crash, the event that triggered the Great Depression and scarred a generation. But what led to it and what followed is a far more intricate, complex drama, one that is misunderstood or unknown. At its core, it is a deeply human story. After writing Too Big to Fail about the financial crisis of 2008, I wanted to explore the most infamous crash in history with the same level of depth, granular detail, and human emotion, not just to tell the story, but to better understand what we might learn from it. The narrative that follows is the product of more than 8 years of reporting and thousands of hours of research. An account built on private letters, diaries, memos, notes, oral histories, court records, board transcripts, depositions, and lawsuits, some of which had never been published or closely examined. In one instance, I was granted access, for the very first time, to the confidential board minutes of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York during the most pivotal months of 1929. In another, I was able to secure a revealing, unpublished memoir of a Wall Street insider who lived through it all. Each scene in this book was assembled from fragments, an offhand remark in a 400-page transcript, a forgotten oral history, a clipped line in a newspaper, a floor plan showing how far someone had to walk to deliver a message. Detail by detail, layer by layer, the picture came into focus. By understanding the motivations and disparate stories of the central actors, we can begin to understand how this calamity happened. Which is why this is not a story about those who endured the fallout. It's about those who helped set it in motion, because that's where the responsibility lies and where the lessons remain. What emerged from this work changed how I understood this period in history. Much of what I uncovered challenged my assumptions, and may challenge yours. If the characters, issues, and policy choices from that time appear to echo our present moment a little too clearly, that's because they do. The arc of the story of 1929 may feel like the response to Ernest Hemingway's famous line, "How did you go bankrupt?" 2 ways, Hemingway's character replies, gradually, then suddenly. That's how confidence, the lifeblood of our economy, disappears. Gradually, and then suddenly. While I was fortunate to uncover previously unseen documents during my research, this book would not exist without the enduring scholarship of others. I'm indebted to the many researchers, archivists, economists, and historians who devoted their lives to studying this period, to the journalists who wrote contemporaneously in the newspapers and magazines of the time, and to authors like John Kenneth Galbraith, whose The Great Crash 1929 remains canonical, John Brooks, whose Once in Golconda is a classic, and Gordon Thomas and Max Morgan Witz, who wrote the riveting The Day the Bubble Burst. In 1920, H.G. Wells, the futurist, already anxious about the direction of the modern world, wrote, human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. I didn't write this narrative to declare a winner in that race, but I hope that by piecing together the story of 1929, I've made the path a little clearer and the stakes a little harder to ignore. Prologue. Charles Mitchell strode up the steps of 55 Wall Street, determined to project his usual sense of confidence and certitude. It had been a crushing afternoon. As he returned to the office, he knew that the eyes of Wall Street were on him. Everyone from the traders in the street to his own secretary were assessing his gait and searching his face, trying to read meaning into every twitch, every line, every wrinkle of his face. In his gray three-piece suit, shoulders back, Mitchell kept up his smile as he passed through the glass-domed central hall of his National City Bank. With its 83-foot ceiling and two solid bronze doors protecting a safe weighing some 300 tons, the bank was the largest in the country. It was just past 5:30 p.m. on Monday, October 28, 1929. Hours earlier, the stock market had closed with a sharp, dizzying drop of 13% after a week of downward convulsions. Today was by far the greatest fall. The darkening downtown streets still teemed with anxious brokers in their fedoras and flat caps, messenger boys and switchboard girls, all gossiping and speculating about the collapse. What caused the fall? How much further might it go tomorrow? Would the markets even open? As Mitchell made his way to his office, the teller windows he passed reflected the wary puffiness under his eyes and his disheveled, graying eyebrows. He collapsed into the chair behind his mahogany desk. The room was furnished with the high formality befitting an 18th century statesman. Antique wood chairs, a grandfather clock that stood against the cream-white woodwork flanked by portraits of George Washington, orchestrating the newly independent nation with the purpose and resolve that Mitchell sought to emulate in his own life. The athletic 52-year-old bank chairman, an unusually optimistic man whom the press called Sunshine Charlie, had spent the afternoon in emergency meetings at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, puzzling over how to calm the market. It was a moment for which a self-consciously great man like Mitchell should have been utterly prepared. He had the experience, the stature, the steely nerves necessary to steer Wall Street through these tough times. Yet he felt exposed, vulnerable. But he didn't have time to consider his emotional state. He walked upstairs to confer with Hugh Baker, who ran National City's stock trading unit. Baker, a tall, bald man with piercing eyes, began to explain to Mitchell calmly, if somewhat obliquely, what had taken place while Mitchell had been at the Federal Reserve. Our portfolio today has been tremendously increased in our holdings of National City Bank stock, Baker told him. Mitchell stared at him, waiting to hear exactly what he meant. Baker finally blurted out, "We purchased 70-odd thousand shares." Mitchell, who could calculate numbers instantly in his head, immediately grasped the nature and scale of the problem. That is unbelievable, he thought. The bank didn't have the cash to pay for so many shares. He was outraged and terrified. Everything he had built was suddenly at grave risk of collapse. Barely a month earlier, Mitchell had been on the top of the world. He had finalized an agreement to take over the Corn Exchange Bank, a bold acquisition that would turn National City from the largest bank in the country into the largest in the world, stealing the mantle from London and helping New York finally eclipse its rival city as the world financial center. This was history in the making, an overthrow of the established order, the kind of gambit that made Mitchell a king among men. But to pull off the deal, Mitchell had made a big and risky bet on the strength of his own stock. Corn Exchange shareholders could take $360 in cash for each of their shares, or 4/5 of a share in National City Bank. On paper, the stock was the better deal. As long as National City's stock stayed above $450, 4/5 of a share was worth more than the $360 in cash. At the time the deal was struck, it was comfortably higher.